Order, please. Natalie, may we have a roll call?
Chairperson Phil Goldstein,
Here.
Vice Chairperson Marty Jose,
Here.
Commissioner Lisa Bard. Here. Commissioner Tom Wood, Commissioner Jeremy Holt,
Here.
alternate Wendy Newland. Here. Alternate Mike Lewis.
Here. Thank you. Any amendments to the agenda? Anybody? Nope. Termination of alternate voting. Kevin, I think Natalie, Wendy voted last time, so Mike will vote this time in lieu of Tom, correct? Okay. Public comment. This is general public comment, a time to address commission on anything that is not on the agenda. Do we have anybody signed up for general public comment? Nobody? Okay. We will close the general public comment. The consent agenda consists only of the approval of the May 16th meeting minutes. Commissioners, any additions or corrections to the minutes? Oh, hearing none. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? A consent agenda motion carries on a 5-0 vote. Business items. We have 3 items all presented by Kevin. 6A, Kevin, vacation of right-of-way adjacent to the Saratoga Falls subdivision. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. This is a application for a vacation of right-of-way, and it is adjacent to the Saratoga Falls subdivision. This is for a portion of Prospect Road, generally around Dead Man Lake, and then a little bit further to the west for where the tie-in for the new Prospect Road is out there. So back in 2011, with the Saratoga Falls third filing, they created a new right-of-way for the realignment of that Prospect Road. And then also for portions of the intersection of County Road 3 or 3 Bell in Prospect Road. That new alignment was completed and opened in 2022. So that road then shifted to that new alignment, thus creating no need for that old right-of-way around Dead Man Lake. That is shown there in that hatched. That is the old right-of-way of what was Prospect. So with the new road, that alignment is no longer needed. When a right-of-way gets vacated, typically what happens is that the property then gets split between the property owners and then dedicated to adjacent property owners to then become real property, and it then reverts to that adjacent property owner. In some of these areas, the adjacent property owners will be the Kitchell Lake development, and then some areas, the adjacent property owners are individual property owners. So then that right-of-way then gets ultimately deeded over to those residents and becomes their property, and then that right-of-way no longer exists. And then utility and access easements are typically placed back on top that are needed and those are done after the fact of the right-of-way being vacated in those instances. So we, SEV had reviewed this application and felt it met the requirement 5 of the facilitates right-of-way exchange with the applicant constructing a road that is located elsewhere on their property. And since the applicant realigned and reconstructed the Prospect Road, this is essentially a transfer of that right-of-way. With that, I'll answer any questions, and it is a public hearing.
We do. Yeah, I wondered, I was going to ask you about that.
Yep.
Do we have anybody signed up? We do. Okay. Before we get to that, you've explained the specific circumstances of the concept of vacation. Mm-hmm. In general, explain to us, if you would, especially, we have some new commissioners, the concept of vacation. This hasn't come up very often that I'm aware of. In general, do you anticipate, among other things, that going forward when the development proposal initially comes in? Is it something you're anticipating it will happen eventually?
Not necessarily. The only reason why we have this one is because we had required the developer to realign Prospect Road. to get rid of essentially the 290-degree curves right around Dead Man Lake. But the vacation of right of way is essentially removing the right of way from the public realm and reverting it back to private property owners from that standpoint. So that's generally a vacation of right of way in a nutshell. Is what that does. Since the right of way is essentially owned by the town, when we vacate that ownership, that's when it gets reverted back to adjacent property owners. But in this instance, it's the whole purpose of this, and I wouldn't see many of these coming forward in the future, just because a lot of the developments are new right of way. And the only reason why this one was to correct a traffic hazard in that area.
Certainly, and it is a nice improvement. Okay, with that, you want to go over the list of anybody who wants to speak public comment? Before you do that, although I wouldn't anticipate necessarily what might come forward, but our policy is 3 minutes. Keep it civil, and please respect others' opinions. And once we close public comment, there is no additional comment allowed. So Natalie, who do we have up first?
Carol Folkrod.
Carol, if you could, is that microphone on? There's a little picture of a graphic of a person speaking, the second one from the right.
Okay,
Okay, 3 minutes. Carol, could you state your name and full name and address, please?
Carol Folkrod, 1520 South County Road 3, Fort Collins.
Thank you.
And so I received a notice about the right of way. And so I have a question about the right of way and some other land that will be added to my land, evidently. So the right of way, right now there's a problem with it because the weeds are growing so tall. I have a hard time viewing traffic coming from the left when I pull out of my driveway, and it's gotten worse since the weeds or grass, whatever it is like 4 feet tall. So I don't know who's going to take care of that right of way.
Oh, is that your only question?
No.
Oh, okay. You have more. Okay. And I should note, some things we can answer on the spot and will answer on the spot. Some things I would say would refer you to one of these esteemed staff members after the meeting, and they can give you some further information. Why don't you go ahead and go down your list, and I'm
Okay.
sure somebody's noting these concerns.
So I'm not sure if I have to sign paperwork or anything, but I would really like to see the boundaries on the ground. I'm not sure if they'd be staked there or whatever, so I can see exactly where they are. And there is a sinkhole that was there last year. I did call Timnath Road Department, but it never was filled in, and I thought it had been, but I was mowing and oh, there it is. And it's about 10 feet away from the new irrigation pipe. I have a feeling that maybe it came about with the water leakage last year. So I would certainly like that to be taken care of before I accept that right of way to my property. So the weeds are growing, let's see. And what is the time frame for the grading and the topsoil for that new road right of way and the extra land? Those are my questions.
Okay, Kevin, staff, anybody, these things we could address now, or do you want me to have Carol refer to you after the meeting?
We can get with her after the meeting.
Okay.
There'll be some joint with a developer and some things like that.
Okay,
So.
Carol, they'll be very good at, so if you would hang around, if that's okay, right after the meeting.
And talk to Kevin.
Yes,
Vogel.
and
Okay,
this gentleman right over here.
sure.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Appreciate you calling those to our attention. Natalie? That's it. Okay, we'll close the public comment on this and bring it up here. Commissioners, questions about this? Item 6A, vacation of the right of way adjacent to the Saratoga Falls subdivision.
So, so this is vacation of the right of way. The easements still stay in place?
Easements that are there will stay in place. Other easements that are needed will be done after the fact by the developer on a as needed basis.
Okay.
That's it. Okay,
I have questions.
Lisa,
So to that end, what easements will be staying and what will be going?
There will be some utility easements and then access easements. There, an access easement that will be placed upon, there's a irrigation pump at Dead Man Lake that some residents need to have access to. And then there's some other utilities in that area. So generally it's utility and access easements.
Okay.
And then the property to the south will also essentially get access easement too. So, but those are generally what the easements would be that get that are going to be on
Okay.
that property.
Can you show us generally on this map who, where the private properties are going or who those are going to be and which areas go to private property and which goes to the developer?
Yep. So generally the one blue strip on kind of the top right, those will all, that will be split amongst the property owners that are adjacent to it on the east. To the south, the kind of the straight leg of it on the south side, that's where it'll get split between the property owner to the south and then the developer. Around the curve of Dead Man Lake, that'll just be retained by the developer because they are technically the owners of that corner of Dead Man Lake and then on the other side of Prospect. So since they're the only owner on both sides, they will ultimately get both of that. So the straight leg of what was Prospect will be split. That leg of County Road 3 Bell, that'll actually get sent over to those adjacent property owners.
Okay. And that's where the property that Carol who just spoke, that's
Yep.
one of her three.
Yeah,
okay.
there's also 3 parcels that are part of that were part of the Saratoga Falls subdivision that are in the ownership of the developer, and they are willing to dedicate those over to the property owners just so that they have a contiguous property ownership up to the right of way.
And so the negotiations will work between the developer, you and the property owner are still ongoing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
this is-
there's still work to be completed out in that area. This is just at this point removing that right of way.
Okay. Those are all the questions.
thank you. And Jeremy, Mike, Wendy, anything? Okay, I don't have any issues with this. It seems like a no-brainer to me. If anybody hasn't been out there, this was a welcome change. It's hard to remember what it was like before. So, all right, with that, I need a motion on business item 6A, the vacation of right-of-way adjacent to the Saratoga Falls subdivision. Got a motion?
I move we approve the vacation of the right of way and allow staff to work out any other details.
Very good. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries on a 5-0 vote. Item 6B, vacation of certain landscape, pedestrian and utility easement created in the Riverbend subdivision.
Thank you, Chairperson. I will actually generally talk about both of these next 2 items as they go hand in hand, but I will talk about the vacation of easement first. So back in 2015, Riverbend Ventures platted the Riverbend subdivision, and with that, they created a 50-foot wide easement along Harmony Road for the purposes for utilities, landscaping, and pedestrian access in that area. So the request that's being at hand tonight is going along with the site plan. So the Harmony Corridor design requirements actually encourages buildings at the corners of intersections to encroach into the Harmony Corridor 50-foot setback by 10 feet for the first 120 feet of frontage to bring the building closer to Harmony Road and that aesthetics, primarily at intersections. The next application, the site plan is actually requesting that easement be reduced by 10 feet for that 120 foot of frontage to meet that Harmony design corridor encouragement. But the only reason why they cannot encroach into that 50-foot area is because of the easement. If there was no easement there, they would be able to do this encroachment without a vacation of easement. Staff is supporting that 10-foot reduction of the 50-foot wide easement for the 110 feet along their frontage because it promotes that requirement of the Harmony Corridor, or not requirement, but the design aesthetic of the Harmony Corridor. And as we'll see on the next one, the next application, the other reason for that is with the development of this lot, they are providing for landscaping in that area, the 10-foot Harmony Road trail within that area. And then utilities are also in that area as well and not being impacted. This applicant did do a utility locate exercise as part of this application, and the utilities are generally located in what's more commonly defined or specifically defined as a 20-foot or 26-foot wide easement against Harmony Road. Those are generally where the utilities are, so there's no conflicts with utilities at that point. So since the intent of this easement is being met by this site plan, that is the other reason why staff supports the reduction of this easement. So with that, I can jump into the next one since it goes hand in hand, or we can leave it on this one alone. On this one, yes,
Sorry, public comment on this?
there is public comment on this.
Yeah,
one, yep.
but the next one, the site plan, there is
There's
no
not,
public
correct.
comment as per the protocol. Let's, commissioners, if that's all right, let's do this one first, okay?
Okay.
All right, anybody asking for speaking public comment on this one? No? Okay, we close public comment and we'll bring it up here. Commissioners, questions?
This easement here, so it would be 40-foot setback. Does that match on the other side of the road?
Not exactly on the other side because the 40-foot setback is only at intersections. So the stuff that's been in Timnath Landing, since they're not at an intersection, they met the 50-foot setback requirement for the Harmony Corridor. Oh, Nina, no, that was, sorry, I thought you were talking about the other side of the road.
Yeah.
No, Nina, that was before the Harmony Corridor standards were actually adopted and introduced. But I believe at that point they are at 50 feet. The Neenan one is they're not at 40. But yeah, the whole purpose when we did the Harmony Corridor standards was to bring more of that architecture into that intersection and mainly at intersections, no other portion. That's why there's that encouragement that buildings at the intersections can encroach into the 50-foot setback by 10 feet, only for 120 feet.
Okay, and so this is that 120 feet. When they do a site plan for to the west of there, are they going to be asking for the same?
We would not allow for that as the same, just because the Harmony Corridor standard is specifically states at intersections, and anything that's not at an intersection wouldn't be eligible for that.
Okay, and to the east of there is a 14.
Along Signal Tree.
Yeah,
Yep, that's the standard utility easement that we have along right of ways.
okay, all right, thanks.
Other questions? Anybody? Jeremy, you look puzzled. You got,
No, I'm just here. Study.
okay. I don't have any issues with this either. This again, so it seems to make sense. So with that, and we can vote, go ahead and vote on this one separately. Okay. Need a motion on item 6B, the vacation of certain landscape, pedestrian and utility easement created in the Riverbend subdivision.
Motion to approve item 6B, vacation.
Very good. Now, second?
Second.
Okay, we have motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries on a 5-0 vote. 6C, Riverbend Lot 1 site plan, Kevin.
Thank you, Chairperson. So along with that easement vacation, this is a site plan proposal for two commercial buildings. The owner is Riverbend Development LLC, represented tonight by Alex Schuman. Applicant is TB Group, represented tonight by Kathy Mathis. This is located at the southwest corner of Signal Tree and Harmony Road. The property is zoned community commercial. This site plan is for roughly 44,000 square feet of building amongst the two on 3.2 acres, which is currently lots 4, 5, and 6 of the Riverbend subdivision. Those lots are going through an administrative plat process to combine the 3 lots into one. Building 1 is the north building fronting Harmony Road. That will be a 1-story building totaling roughly 14,700 square feet. With the anticipation of providing retail and restaurant users. Building 2, which is the one on the east side of the site bordering Signal Tree, will be a 2-story building totaling roughly 29,200 square feet with the anticipation of retail and office users. The uses of restaurant, retail, and office are permitted within the Harmony Corridor and Community Corridor zoning districts. The parking requirement for roughly 2,300 or 23,000 square feet of retail is 76 spaces. And then for 13,600 square feet of office is 34 spaces. And then 6,600 square feet of restaurant with patio is 70 spaces for a total of 180 spaces required. This development is proposing 144 spaces, which includes 2 EV charging spaces and ADA spaces. They are requesting this due to section 5.8.10 of the land use code, which allows for parking to be reduced up to 20% with them being multi-use, multi-tenant buildings, which these would be. From that standpoint, which would then meet this, the 144 would meet that requirement. The proposed plan includes 33% of the site being landscaping, meeting the minimum requirement of 25%, and then the 5% usable open space, which is being met through the site for multiple plaza areas that they have that will be furnished with planter beds, benches, and some other amenities such as shade sails. This site plan was reviewed against section 510 of the land use code for compliance with the Harmony Corridor standards. They meet all architectural, landscaping, and site requirements except for the 2 standards that are mentioned below, or mentioned that I'll mention in a second, which are being requested to be waived for the site staff and the design review committee. Harmony Design Review Committee have reviewed the waiver requests and found them to be acceptable. The first one is for the parking reduction, the 5-8-10 for the 20% due to the multi-tenant buildings and the differences of use times between office, retail, and restaurant, how those demands are different throughout the day. And then the other request that they are making is to 2.9.9.10 of the code, which would allow for a 15% height increase for the 2-story building. The applicant is requesting this to go from 35 feet, which is the community commercial requirement, up to 38, roughly 38 and a half feet for the purposes of some gable roof features, and then for screening of rooftop mechanical equipment. Per section or per code requirement 2944, there was a neighborhood meeting required for a site plan of 2 or more buildings. That meeting was held on October 6th of last year for the purposes of gathering any feedback. There were no residents that had shown up, and from that, there's no observation report generated. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kathy for a brief presentation.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm Kathy Mathis with TB Group. I'm not going to repeat a lot of what Kevin says because he did a great job. So probably be very, very brief, but I do have Alex Schuman here with me to answer any questions. Again, you can probably skip this one. I don't think I can drive this. Oh, is this it? Where do I point? Anywhere? Okay, this just is a little bit more of a graphic example that shows that reduction in the encroachment into the setback. So that just shows where the building kind of pops out there, and what Kevin did a great job explaining why we're asking for that utility easement, that portion to be vacated. So that's just showing that. Here's the overall site, which Kevin had shown you. It's just a pretty picture. 44,000 square feet. We talked about the parking reduction, the 20%, the height exception, and then the amount of open space. He covered that. This is just a graphic that shows sort of where we focused on those plaza and outdoor gathering areas. We had to have 3,000 square feet, and it was a little challenging to fit that on such a small site. So we really worked with staff, and they did a great job in helping us figure this out. So these are kind of the 4 amenity areas. In particular is a pretty big one up on the Harmony Corridor, where the trail is, the roadside trail, and we've got several stone seating areas up in there, and added that to, we do exceed the 3,000 square feet by about 400. We have about 3,400 square feet. Here's the building elevations for building 1, which is what Kevin had mentioned is primarily going to be retail with probably 2 restaurant end caps. You can see on those more of a pitched roof on the ends. This is a perspective of the same building. And then this is building 2, which Kevin mentioned is a 2-story building, which will have predominantly more office uses inside there. So that's that. And then here's the perspective of that building. So that's really all I have tonight. Unless you guys have questions, we're happy to answer them.
Okay, and I'm going to explain to the public, this is a site plan is the particular nomenclature, and there is no public comment on a site plan generally. So not just generally, specifically. So in case anybody wondered, I'm not necessarily going first here. When we bring it up, I'm going to tee something up. My favorite subject is number of parking spaces. I presume staff is comfortable, because you said you're comfortable with the reduction. And we've had reductions before, but we've also had we have sensitivity to that. So if anybody else has any comments about that, in addition to anything else you want to offer, and then I'll finish things up when we get to the end here about my perspective on it. So who wants to go first? Questions, Lisa? You're figuring 20% there? Right, that's right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I've
Jeremy, go ahead.
that's kind of my some of my questions too. So being that it is, so building 1, how many total units are in that? That's the one that's predominantly restaurants and retail, correct? Okay, how many total units?
That's to be determined.
Okay.
Currently it's core show, we're, in discussion with that.
Why don't you come up, Kathy, why don't you both, you and Alex, come up, and Alex, introduce yourself. I know who you are.
Alex Schuman. To answer the question, yeah, the amount of users have not been identified currently, but we'll be building the building core and shell as a spec.
Okay.
However, we have been in discussion with some users, so the demising lines have not been determined at this point.
Okay. I mean, I think I guess my biggest concern, right, is 20% is, I mean, it's right at the max, would be that 144 is exactly 20%. This town's been begging for more restaurants and retail. So I think the excitement could potentially be there to have a lot of overlap at the same time. I mean, office space is Monday through Friday, I don't know, 7:30 to 5, maybe 6, something like that. And a lot of the restaurants and retail are going to overlap in that 4 to 8 or plus timeframe. So that would be my concern, is that thought process, knowing that we're maxing out that 20%, is 144 enough, knowing that this town is only growing and is in need of restaurants and retail.
Yeah, I guess, parking is always a concern, for every project. We have mimicked this project and kind of modeled everything after really, I'd say Share 2 or in Harmony Commons, and another project we've done off of Crossroads Commons, that we have utilized the parking reduction. And, even though that it is tight, I mean, it does meet, I think the standards, and, I think accommodate folks at the right times.
Is there any, I mean, I know that we're talking maxing out space even to get to the 3,000 square feet on the landscape. Is there any room past this point if we need to expand to parking? Or are we maxed out on the whole lot?
Yeah, so we actually, to get to this parking count, we've actually reduced the footprints of these buildings from where we originally had started to make the numbers work.
Let me add on to this. It seems like an appropriate time. Or is there anticipated, let alone the reality of another development, Riverbend, adjacent to this, such that, I mean, this was the issue with the Neenan development. We knew there would be something in the vicinity. Is there anything anticipated that would be adjacent to it that would provide a reasonable overflow?
My answer would be yes. This is phase one, and I'm hopeful to be developing the remaining parcel to the west, going to the river edge.
Jeremy, does that
That answers my question.
does that help
Yep.
at all?
It does.
All right, I'm going to come back. Let me ask one more question here because it may prompt some other things. Are you anticipating more than one restaurant? Because Jeremy's comment is very well said in a couple veins, and that is the town is begging for more restaurants.
Sounds like two, right?
Certainly.
The end caps are probably.
So we've planned it. Yeah, so our restaurant user would end up on the two end caps with the patio design, and we've actually are keeping a close eye on to it. And as I had mentioned, there will be a phase two of this project where if we max out the restaurants, there'll be overspill onto phase two.
So his point is well made, and he used the expression, I think, overlap, counting lunch. Let alone, I don't know if he's open for breakfast, but counting lunch, certainly. This is a concern.
We want to see things succeed here, right? So hopefully there are 144 people in that parking lot on a regular basis, but that'd be my biggest concern. But sounds like you guys have gone through that and feel somewhat comfortable. Any concerns on your guys' part on that?
I mean, we don't have many concerns with the reduction of parking just because of the overlapping of the users, with, having a difference between, retail and office. For the most part, will have generally the same hours. As you mentioned, restaurant versus office are gonna, have the end overlap. We kind of also look at it as the Neenan, they got the 20% reduction, and looking at it almost every day, they're never really more than 2/3 full. From that standpoint, and we're kind of down to the last one or two on that one. So with the differencing and overlapping of those users, that's where we're more comfortable with it. If it was all intended to be office, I think we would have had a different thought on it. But because you can, even within office, you could get multiple different types of office users to where, the parking demand is higher in the morning versus the afternoon. So that's where we got comfortable with the multitude of users that are proposed within it.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern to his point is lunch, and then that 4 to 6, right? I mean, those are the two. You're not gonna have office use on the weekends, right? So that part, hopefully the restaurants are as packed as possible.
Yep.
But that would be my only concern, and if you guys feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, and like Alex had mentioned, and I believe he can kind of touch on it a little bit more, but I believe the Riverbend development for the commercial does have cross use agreements for shared parking. Is
That is correct. Fair enough.
I don't want to beat this up too much, except it is a big concern, and I know council has a concern about it too. Alex, the development the commercial development where DC Oaks is, I'm reminded of how difficult that was before they expanded that to the west. And eventually, I believe they yielded to some pressure, and even though it wasn't paved, they allowed parking on what ended up becoming the additional parking to the west when they opened up the second and third phases of that. Is there, again, sort of an uncharted territory here, is there a possibility, knowing that you're going to continue to develop this, that if this becomes a problem, you could make available, to the extent that it meets the town standards for whatever parking, safety, whatever, make that additional land available for overflow parking?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if that's if we meet that concern, with, I guess, control of that side, yeah, we can definitely accommodate that if that does occur at that point, and work with the town to meet temporary parking standards.
So staff and commissioners, Jeremy, you got this one really ball rolling on this too. Is that something we could have conveyed to council that we asked this question. The developer graciously acknowledged that they would. Oh, they're not going to see this well, it's multiple, they will see this at multiple buildings.
Yeah, as multiple buildings, they will see this.
Yeah, so anybody think this is your ball, so.
Yeah, no, I'm good with that. Putting notes to where and if, right? I mean, obviously, to your point, if you have possession and, you know, moving forward on that side, and if it gets to that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's in everyone's best interest. So yeah, that's a, I guess, no
Yeah,
brainer
but
on my
definitely
end.
have that noted.
Good with that?
Noted to council. I think.
Yeah, I think
That'd be appropriate.
if you would, okay. So what other questions do you have? And we want to cover the modest variance on the height thing as well. But anything else?
I have some questions.
That's your question. Go ahead.
First of all, just for clarification, do you own the property to the west? Do you own the next?
I do have the property under contract
Okay, so there's that is flexibility is under your
and
jurisdiction.
I fully intend to close.
Okay. You said that you reduced the footprint of the buildings there to accommodate what you could do and for that. Can you tell us how much you reduced that footprint?
Yeah, so when we started, I guess to run through just my original pro forma, we were hoping to get to closer to about 50,000 square feet to spread out my land basis. And so it's significantly shrunk to, get to the parking once we got into the land planning exercise. And so, this is kind of where the numbers met to, make economic sense.
Did the 50,000 that you originally had planned, was that just because that's what you wanted the buildings to be and you didn't plan on the parking?
It was a formula to, spread economic basis on our land purchase.
Okay.
So we lost some building footprints throughout the process.
Okay. And then do you anticipate that with the property to the west, or knowing now what you know that you're planning buildings that are more in line with the, the process and with the
yeah, we're
mandates?
just getting into the design there to figure out, setbacks and utility easements of what, can be designed there to meet the
Okay.
criteria.
And then my last question, and just for perspective, because I think this will help us, they brought up the DC Oaks and the challenge that was there. I'm familiar with that as well. And I don't know if you own that property or not, doesn't matter.
I did develop the two prior buildings that are on the west side of that project.
Okay. Was the parking there, did you go into that developing with a reduction in the parking as well?
So I was not involved in that project from the beginning, but I do believe that, the original developers there was a parking variance from the beginning, given the mixed use structure and the way the buildings were set up between retail and office stipulation of what the uses could be predetermined from the beginning.
Okay. And was that variance at 20% also, or do you know?
I'm not sure.
Kathy's shaking her head like, no. Was it
No,
more?
Kathy was.
I'm just trying to get
original planning.
perspective.
Yeah, I did work on that for Brinkman when they developed it originally. And I don't remember that we actually got a parking reduction, but I know the city of Fort Collins had us assume a certain percentage of retail, a certain percentage of office and a restaurant. And so I think we had a little calculation where we said it's this much, 20% of this, 20, and that's how we parked it for the Fort Collins project.
And so where did it go wrong?
Go wrong?
You mean?
Well, because parking was such a problem there for a while.
Well, I think, for a while, I guess, it was probably during construction.
Okay.
I think they were just too successful, to be honest with you. They had more
To Jeremy's
restaurants than
point.
they probably thought, and they were very successful. And that's why they wound up building, this temporary, just like Nordy's.
Yeah.
Nordy's is the same way, they had a temporary parking lot for a long time. So I think that's probably what happened there, but it's all evened out now that the rest of it's all.
Yeah. I just think that's our concern, is if it does not go as planned under this 20% reduction, then okay, what are the options? Because we really don't want to set retail or set any of your up for failure, but we also don't want to have it to where parking is just a nightmare.
Yeah, I think it's I think the short-term solution would be that, looking at short-term parking on, the adjacent property until the remaining project is fully built out.
And Fort Collins does do a maximum parking, not a minimum like we do. So from that standpoint, Fort Collins is also a little bit different from that just because they do a maximum requirement, not a minimum.
Okay.
Go ahead and add on, but then you may have more,
Yeah.
because I want to stay on this subject
So
for a little while longer.
I won't add to it.
Okay,
But it seems like with that one, the percentage of restaurants is probably higher than anticipated. So in this one, let's just say building one, you have 2 restaurants in there. Is it even a possibility if somebody wanted to put a restaurant in building 2 that they could do that? In this one,
One's up top.
Well, yeah.
one.
Yeah, so I mean, our intent is looking at, 2 restaurant end caps on building 1.
Or in building
Well, then we'd have to, it's gonna, I mean, we're gonna have to look at, the other users going into the equation.
Yeah, when we get a change of use application building permit, we review what that use is, what the square footage that they have against what's been approved here to determine if that user is meeting parking requirements or not. So when we get building permit side of things, we do look at that. Just as we do currently with Neenan, we also look at that to determine if they're meeting. So if we've got 4 restaurant users that come in that would well exceed this, then there's a different conversation to be had with those end users.
But no restaurants are envisioned for building 2.
Currently, no.
what other questions? And then I'm gonna try and wrap it up, but kind of lock in what we're discussing here in the way of a note, at the minimum, a note to council. So what other question, Wendy? For the moment,
I think that's on. So is it building 2 that you're moving from 30 or requesting 35 feet to 38.5?
Correct. The one that's being run in parallel to Signal Tree.
To accommodate mechanical equipment?
Correct. So yeah, we're exceeding the height limit once we account for the screening of the rooftop units.
Okay. And I'm not an engineer, so I'm gonna ask a really dumb question. What kind of mechanical equipment goes on up there?
Your AC, or not, yeah, in this situation, yeah, we're looking at all of your AC condensers and your RTU units, which is your furnace heating systems.
Gotcha.
okay, other,
I guess to that.
turn your mic on.
Yeah, to that point, is there design aesthetics to hide some of those features, or is that pretty?
They are screened.
Okay.
Yeah, the
And you said
increase.
gables too, or something,
Yeah, the increase of the wall is what screens the mechanical equipment with that. And then the architect did put in a different gabled roof feature kind of in the middle, which then also exceeds that height requirement just to give a different breakup from that standpoint. But the general need for it is for the screening of mechanical equipment.
And kudos to whoever made that the requirement, because that's a beautiful looking building. So
But Matt Rankin can take credit.
yeah, that's good.
Commissioners, other questions? No. Mike, anything? No. All right, as far as the, I think I got all my statements made. As far as the notation, if you will, we'll call it for the moment. Staff, help me with this. Is this something that would be appropriate for a condition going forward to council, that commissioners, particularly Marty and Lisa, have been on here almost as long as I have? Is this something we want to have a condition that the developer, or are we comfortable that this will be a strong notation to council that the developer graciously acknowledged that if this becomes a problem at the town's decision, that they would open up overflow parking?
It cannot be a condition because you are putting a condition on a property that is not associated with this site plan or even at the time being under the ownership of the current or of the proposed owner of this site plan. So it can't be a condition because you're putting a condition that may or may not be met with this. If that adjacent property was part of the site plan, you could, but at this point, it would be a notation to council about the overflow, just because you cannot condition this site on property that currently that property owner doesn't own or is part of the site.
Okay, so thanks. Makes that stringent aspect of this a moot point. Jeremy, you could, with that, it'll be a notation.
Yeah, I think.
I'll be here at council to.
Yeah, I think just a good notation,
Trust
the
staff.
willingness
Right,
to support any of our concerns. So.
Okay, thank you. And appreciate you acknowledging that. I had a feeling you always have been cooperative, and I had a feeling you would see it that way. Okay, commissioners, any other questions for Alex, Kathy, or staff on this? No? Okay. With that, I need a motion on business item 6C, Riverbend Lot 1 site plan.
I put forward a motion to approve item 6C Riverbend site plan.
A second? We have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries on a 5-0 vote.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, reports. And by the way, before we wrap this up, Kathy, don't forget, Kathy, right? Carol, sorry, Carol, don't forget to come up here and over here, and staff will chat with you and address some of those or all those concerns. Okay. Reports, commissioners, anything?
I have a question. So I didn't bring it up with 6A because it was related to, but not a part of that is with all the right-of-way changes and things, is there plans the developer or anybody else has to put the Osprey nest, the pole back up? Because I noticed it, they built on that utility pole and it was torn down.
That utility pole actually sits on the property owners to the south.
Okay,
It sits on that property, not within the right of way.
okay. So no plans?
Not that I know of. And when we actually went through the plating process, I did meet out there with CPW, and CPW did mention that Osprey are very susceptible to come back to find a different nesting in the location, in the general location.
Something we may want to consider for the reservoir, given we tore down all their trees.
That would be a question for him and the reservoir company.
Was him, Matt? Okay, well, nice buck passing. for
We
the
didn't tear
record.
down any trees. It was a reservoir company that tore down the trees.
Okay, are you going to pass this to Chad now?
Yeah, well, pass it to somebody beyond Jed.
Oh,
It would be nice to consider. I mean, we're doing so many other things out there. It'd be nice to add some habitat back to bring some birds back.
Yeah, most of those questions are for the ditch company because trees aren't something that they really like.
No, I'm not saying put a tree up. I'm saying put a pole,
Oh.
for nesting and things.
Well, we can certainly come up with some ideas and then propose them to the ditch company. And if they're agreeable to them, that we could look at it.
that would be much appreciated from, at least from my colleagues' standpoint, and perhaps some others out there, and all the people, thousands of people watching at home, and all the ships at sea here. So, okay. Other questions, comments, commissioners? Dawn, anything? Anybody else? Okay, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn? I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.